Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kunda Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Guru Dwarka Dham ki jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the Excellency. All glories to the Excellency. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hope all of you can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Very good.
Yeah, all good. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I hope all of you are doing fine. You're going through a very difficult time right now with this phase of pandemic, especially in some places of the world, especially India. And I think all of us have some connection with India. You might have friends or relatives. So it's a difficult time, and hope we can pass through this soon. But we should take again this opportunity to take more shelter of Krishna, just like Kunti Devi. She prays to Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam that she and all her children, right, Pandavas, right from an early age, they were put into so many difficulties, troubles from the Kauravas, and many lethal attacks, right from the childhood. Bhim was attempted to be killed first by poisoning, right, and then they tried to burn the wax house, right, and there's so many other ways, they were put into difficulty. And Kunti says that to Lord Krishna when he was departing Hastinapur to go back to Dwarka, he says all this, incidents of calamities gave me an opportunity to take more shelter, of you, right? And so, in this way, whether things are favorable or not favorable, the only thing we can do is take more and more shelter of the Lord. This place is described as a padam padam, vipadam natesham, is this material world. At every step there is a danger. So by design it is like this, but there's a purpose behind it to remind us that we really do not belong over here, and we can begin our spiritual inquiry. Okay, so having said that, we will continue with our conversation on Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, which is Karma Yoga, and we completed our discussion through text 33. We are almost approaching the end of instructions from Krishna to Arjuna, where Krishna is explaining how one should engage according to one's own nature. And then when they see other people who are engaged for fruitive reasons, they should not stop them. They should continue. A person who is intelligent would continue to engage them in their propensities, but then eventually help them come to the platform of knowledge. So the last verse we discuss is Krishna is elaborating on this point where he says that everyone is forced to act according to the nature, and repressing one's nature cannot accomplish anything. So we continue with verse 34. Indriyasyendriyashyarthe ragadvesho vyavasthito tayornavasam agachet tohi asya paripanthino. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion. pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion, because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Interesting. So here, raga, attachment means raga, aversion means dvesha. So in many Indian languages, we hear these words used in combination. We say one should be free from raga and dvesha. Many times we don't realize that there's two words that they are on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So when you try, but you see, raga means attachment, and then dvesha means aversion. The Prabhupada translates raga, dvesha. And what is this in relation to? The raga and dvesha is in relation to senses and sense objects. So senses are attached to sense objects, right? That is raga. And then when one gets frustrated, then one rejects it. So that is dvesha. And Krishna is saying neither is good. Neither rag is good, neither dvesha is good. So it's a very neutral, not neutral, it's a transcendental position. It transcends the dualities. This world is full of dualities, right? Heat and cold, happiness, distress, conservative, liberals. We talked about the nature last time. But spirituality means, it's not one or the other, neither a central position, like you have, we have the political spectrum, you have on the left, you have people on the right, and then you have the centrist, right? It takes the middle path. So this is not like the middle path, it's not anywhere in the spectrum, it completely transcends it. And so Krishna is saying here that one should not come under the control of either such attachment or aversion, because both of them are actually stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. So this is in line with similar instruction Krishna gave earlier in the chapter. Do you recall? It was famous verse, one of the most famous verses of Bhagavad Gita, especially when people who have not read Bhagavad Gita, they know this verse. Also the most or the least understood but the most popular verse. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phalesu kadachana ma karma phal heturbhur mate sangasta akarmani. If you recall that particular verse, we try to find it out. But in this verse, Krishna is saying that, well, you have right to perform your action, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. What is it? Perform. Let me see. It's in this chapter only, right? Perform. Yeah. Perform your prescribed duties. Work done. Remember. Yeah. Now. Karmanyevadhikaraste, very famous verse.
Oh, is that in the second chapter, Prabhu?
I think, yeah, you're right. Karmanyevadhikaraste. So in this verse, what does Krishna say? Karmani, you're right to perform action, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. So these are the people who are attached to the fruits. Krishna is saying, no, that is not good. You should not be, your primary interest should not be the results that you get. That is natural in one way, right, on a material platform. But he says that's not how one should act. On the other hand, then what do you say in the second line? Don't consider yourself to be the cause of the fruits, and do not be attached to not doing your duties. You see, so what is the so first was attachment. Ma karma phal hetur, ma phalesu kadachana. Do not be attached to the fruits. That means this is people who are attached. He's saying do not be attached. And then what's the other side of the spectrum? Other side of the spectrum is people who give up things artificially. They become sannyasis or whatever, because they are frustrated. It's not that they have a genuine renunciation, but they want to, it's just too troublesome for them. So they want to reject it. So then Krishna says, don't be attached to not working, right? So that is, so what does that mean? Aversion is another form of attachment. Let's see. Right? right? So here he says, see here, yeah, 247. You're right to perform your prescribed duties, but you're not entitled to fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. Never be attached to not doing work. See? So not doing work is what? Not doing your duty is aversion, right? One is averse. But how is it phrased? He says attached to not doing work. That means aversion is just another manifestation of attachment. And that's why in spirituality, the two positions of dualities, whether it's heat and cold, conservative, liberal, whatever you say, any kind of dualities that you see in this world, from a spiritual perspective, they are both considered same. And that's why spirituality rejects both of them and suggests that one should transcend the dualities. Why? Because it's just a different manifestation of the same disease. Right? Just like the electricity, the same electricity we can use for heating. The same electricity can be used for cooling. Right? So you have the heater that people use during winter. And then when comes summer, then same electricity can be used for cooling. Right? So what is it? In essence, it's the same energy. Similarly, any dualities that we see in this world, they are actually externally appearing as a duality, when reality, if you see the root, they are same. So aversion is just another form of attachment. And why is Krishna saying this to Arjuna? Remember, why did Arjuna was first thinking, I will fight so that I will gain the kingdom and I will enjoy with my family members. And then why when he saw actually his, who is fighting on the other side, right? His guru, his grandfather. Then he says, I don't want to fight, because why? He says, even if I win, there won't be any enjoyment. So now he is averse to doing duties, right? But what was the root cause? The root cause for both fighting and not fighting is same. What is it? He wanted to enjoy. He says, now I won't be able to enjoy, so what's the reason for fighting? So it externally appears that these are two different things. Somebody is not trained might think, oh, Arjuna, he's there was a change in his heart, it's a transformation, and he wants to be peaceful and doesn't want to fight. But Krishna is able to see through it. So he says, this is not any different. You're still on the same platform. It's it's just another manifestation of the same attachment. And so that's what Krishna is again trying to say, the same message to him in different ways. Because see, he had already explained this to him in chapter 2, right? But he did not understand, right? What does he ask in the beginning of 3rd chapter? He says, Krishna, you said all this, but it makes no sense to me. You said, if the knowledge is more important, if the ultimate goal is knowledge, then let me just act on the platform of knowledge. I mean, why I have to actually do the duty? Why you are making me fight in this ghastly war, right? So now Krishna is saying the same thing, but he's saying in a different way. If you look at the essence is the same thing. One should not come under the control of attachment and aversion, because they are stumbling blocks on the path of realization. He's just saying the same thing in a different way, right? So aversion is nothing but another manifestation of attachment. So there are rules and regulations. Srila Prabhupada will explain these rules and regulations. See, vyavasthito, put under regulations. So these rules and regulations are there to principles to regulate attachment and aversion. So because people are subject to these dualities of attachment and aversion, the rules are actually meant to liberate us. It's a very interesting principle. Generally, people think rules are binding, right? You sign a contract and you say rules, they are final and binding. We are bound by the rules. Actually, the purpose of rules is not to bind us. The real purpose of the rules is to liberate us. Yeah, it seems counterintuitive. Just like, again, this example many times, you have the training wheels when the child is learning how to ride a bike. So what is the purpose of, as an adult, if somebody looks at it, oh, this training wheels are a nuisance, they are binding the child, in the sense that it limits the motion of the child, right? You cannot bend too much while you're taking the turn, which is true. But actually, for the child, those rules are helpful. What is limiting the child is actually meant to liberate the child, so that eventually the child will be able to ride the bike without the training wheels. And when the child is ready, then those rules, they become a hindrance, right? Earlier, the rules were helping him. The training wheels were helping the child. Now the training wheels are becoming a hindrance. And then what do? We remove the training wheels and let the child ride. Yeah. So the rules and regulations are like that. So people who do not understand the real reason, they get so attached to the rules that they say these rules have to be followed at all times in all circumstances, right? On the other hand of the the other end of the spectrum, there are people who, what we call liberals. They also do not understand, just like the conservative, far right conservatives don't understand the real purpose of the rules, and then they don't understand the spirit of the law. They understand the word, they just go by the word of the law, and so they insist to follow them at all time, all circumstances. And similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who say we should not follow rules at any point in time, right? So they see, one is attached to the rules, one is averse to the rules. But both attachment to the rules and aversion to rules, they are actually on the same platform. There is no difference, because both of them are different manifestation of improper understanding of the real purpose of the rules. Just like attachment to senses and attachment of the senses towards sense objects and aversions of the senses to the sense objects, both are on the same platform. There is no difference. So those who are artificial renunciates, those who are actually attached, they are obviously fully under the control of their senses, right? They are simply interested in sense gratification, just always interested in pleasing the senses. Krishna uses the word indriya arama. Says they waste their life. Earlier in this chapter we read that indriya arama, they only want to be aram, just be comfortable. So that is obviously a degraded situation. On the other hand, those who say, after they get frustrated, they become averse to it, and they reject sense gratification, like Arjuna did, right? But then they are also missing the purpose. What is the purpose? Well, purpose is that everything can be used in the service of Krishna. All our senses, just like we honor prasadam, right? So it's, when a devotee honors prasadam in proper consciousness, he's not thinking of gratifying one's own tongue, but one's thinking, these are remnants of the food offered to Krishna, and I am a menial servant of the Lord, so I am eating the remnants, right? So one takes that humble position and one relishes in that way. So everything can be engaged in service of Krishna. That's why a devotee is neither attached, neither averse to the rules. He knows the higher purpose. So Prabhu said something, choices everywhere. My goal was to keep writing, but okay. So this is
Prabhuji, I just wrote something about, like, on my blog last year about this, so I just was sharing that.
Yeah. So we'll look at.
No, I mean, we don't have to read it. I just, like, maybe
okay.
People can give me some feedback whenever they have time.
Yeah, there was a similar article in I believe Forbes, which New York Times. Sorry, it says tyranny of convenience. So choices is one thing, and then another is convenience. People are attached to convenience, and this author, it's a New York Times journalist, and he wrote this nice. I'll share it with you. He says tyranny of convenience, how convenience can become a problem. That's an interesting perspective, and it's true actually. I wrote about that as well. But it violates, the convenience essentially violates the principle of austerity, which is one of the legs or pillars of dharma. Okay, so here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, those who are in Krishna consciousness, they are naturally reluctant to engage in sense gratification. They are not interested in gratifying their senses. But those who are not in such consciousness, they should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Because the rules and regulations, as I explained, their purpose is to liberate. Their purpose is not to bind us. But the regulation provides us those guiding rails in which one can learn how to make progress in spirituality, just like a child learns how to ride a bike assisted by training wheels. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. See, unrestricted. What is the difference? Difference is regulation versus unrestricted. This is the liberal idea. Right? Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. But one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by these sense objects. So the rules and regulations, they not only limit, but the essence of, you see, of all these rules is the propensities for our senses. What is the propensity of our senses is to act. Whether it is knowledge acquiring senses, they are naturally attracted towards sense objects because they want to gain knowledge about, or gain knowledge in the sense they want to experience those sense objects. And the working senses are also similarly by their nature forced to act. So as Krishna was saying, what will repression serve? There is no point in artificially repressing it. But all those activities, both the activities of knowledge acquiring senses, which is essentially your nose, tongue, eyes, ears, skin, and then working senses are the arms, legs, right? Reproductive organs, excretory organs, tongue is also both knowledge acquiring and working senses, because tongue, the function of tasting is knowledge acquiring, and the function of speaking is a working sense. So tongue is an organ that has both functions. So all these functions can be used in the service of Krishna. So a devotee sees a purpose in it, and so he does not reject. He is not averse to these proclivities of senses, because everything can be used in the service of Krishna. So here the example is given that the greatest bondage in this material world is sex enjoyment. And this sex enjoyment is necessity in the sense that, just like I gave the example, all senses, they have a function, and so they would act according to the nature of those senses. But this is allowed within the social institution of marriage. So according to scriptural injunction, one is forbidden to engage in sexual relationships outside of marriage. So the Vedic culture is, one addresses all women as one's mother. Matravat paradareshu. Chanakya Pandit says it. Paradhavyeshu lostravat. He says, Atmavat sarva bhutesu yaha pashyati sah pandita. Who is a pandit? The real pandit is one who looks upon other women as one's mother. And the belongings or properties of other people, just like a lump of sand. That means there is no value. So one should not envy the riches and prosperity of others. And Atmavat sarva bhutesu, one who treats everyone as he would himself like to be treated. Such a person is a pandit. So that is a culture. But in spite of such injunction, a man is inclined to have sexual relationships with other women. Right? So these propensities have to be curbed. Otherwise, they become stumbling blocks in the path of self-realization. So then once somebody actually realizes, okay, this is actually a stumbling block, or somebody has indulged into this to such an extent that they are frustrated and they give up. And so that is also aversion. So now they completely reject it. But a devotee sees that, there is a function because, one one can beget good children, and then raise them in proper spiritual culture. So that is a great service. So you see, has an important function. So a devotee does not reject, right? But then devotee is not indulging in it, right, in an unrestricted way, as it was described here earlier, right? So in essence, as long as material body is there, the necessities of the material bodies are there, and they are all allowed, but under rules and regulation. We should not rely upon the control of such allowances. It's an important point. What does that mean? We should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them, because the practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always a chance of an accident even on the royal roads. So here this is talking about understanding the spirit of the law, because somebody knows the word of the law and they start practicing, so now they are regulated, right? But if they do not understand the spirit of the law, what they will do is, within the constraints of the laws, they will still indulge in sense gratification, right? And then we see that across all cultures, across all religions, in general, even people who are religious, or you take up spirituality, which is meant to uplift them, uh, masses in general, they do that by habit or by tradition or culture, and they have limited understanding of the spirit of the law. And so what they do is, within the bounds of those regulations, they indulge in sense gratification. Yeah. So there are many examples of this. For instance, Ekadasi, one is supposed to fast. Ideally, one should fast fully from water and grains, everything, right? Nothing one should take, and one should use that time which is saved from cooking, from not having to cook, and not having to spend time eating, right? You limit all that, and then one chants and reads, engages in different spiritual activities. But many times you see devotees, they take the opportunities, aspiring devotees, or you're trying to make some progress, but because they don't understand the spirit of the law, what happens is, okay, they don't take any grains on Ekadasi, but they will make all kind of feasts, elaborate feast preparation, and they will make sure that grains are not used, right? So that is Ekadasi fasting. And sometimes the variety of cooking might be even more than what is cooked on a regular day, right? And then what happens is, one is actually still ending up doing sense indulgence, right? Or even on regular days, when we honor prasadam, if you don't honor it with proper consciousness, oh, this is remnants of the, someone say one has taken a vow, I'm only going to eat prasadam, right? So there is regulation, right? So because now one is forcing that, oh, everything that I eat has to offer to Krishna is for his enjoyment, I'm going to eat remnants. So now one is following the rule because the rule has to be followed, but if he doesn't do it in right consciousness, then when he says, oh, Krishna then just becomes like a machine. Apparently you can make the food karma free because it's now offered to Krishna, it is not bound by karma, but now the food is karma free, I'm going to indulge in it and eat it full up to my belly, and gratify my tongue, right? And I'll cook what I like, right? And just offer it to Krishna. So all this, so even within rules and regulations, that's why Srila Prabhupada is saying one should not rely upon the control of such allowances. Oh, those allowances are there, I'm within these allowances, so I'm acting. One has to follow the rules and regulation unattached to them. People, if they are attached, no, I'm going to attach means I'm going to follow rules and regulation, to the point. But because the practice of sense, gratification under regulation may also go to astray. So this is where one can still indulge in sense gratification under the regulations. So the example that is given is that just because there is a freeway, which it's just like if it is a in a lot of places of the world where you don't have great infrastructure, right? It's not a paved road, and sometimes there are potholes or big potholes, or even there might be a ditch, right? There could be landslides and other things, and so the probability of accident is higher, right? Now, if one is going on a freeway or a highway which is constructed very nice, maintained very well, all these signals and the signs, all the markings on the road, they are always making sure it's freshly paved, there's no potholes. And this is done with the purpose that, there are no crashes. But does it mean that there won't be any crashes? No. The chance is always there. Because again, it depends on the individual driver. Similarly, one who is he is completely unregulated. That person has a great danger of degrading, to the lowest level, wasting one's valuable human life. So the rules and regulations are compared to that royal roads where everything is paved nicely, and the roads are maintained, and there are signals and signs, and so these rules and regulations, they are like the training wheels. They allow us, they ensure that we don't fall down. Fall down means we engage in sinful activities. That's a fall down, right? Overindulgence in sense gratification or any kind of indulgence, right? So just like training wheels, they stop us from falling down. The rules and regulations stop us from falling down. But that does not mean that as long as we are following rules and regulations, there's no possibility of fall down, because even while within the constraints of the rules and regulations, one can still indulge in sense gratification if one has not imbibed and understood the spirit of the law, right? And then other traditions also, just like the Eid just got over. A lot of people in the Eid, right, you do fasting from sunrise to evening. But then as soon as evening, you just kind of, especially after Eid is over, iftar, right, the final day, people would just, what they call, indulge completely. Whatever they have not eaten in 30 days, they will kind of simply plunge upon it, right? So it's not just to pick on a particular religion. We saw that even in Hindu or Vaishnava tradition also gave examples. This propensity is there everywhere, right? So when people don't understand the spirit of the law, just like there are different gradations, but in all religions the spirit is same. Just like in the Vedic culture, we say is complete no meat eating, right? Because mercy is an important principle. In Islam, what is the principle? Principle is halal. So the animal has to be slaughtered in a certain way that it does not feel pain. But if somebody really understands why that rule is there, rule is mercy. You don't want the animal to suffer, right? But if you go in essence to the root, that this is mercy principle, and if you take it to its logical extreme, the Muslims will also come to the conclusion that the best thing is not to kill any animal, right? What halal is better than unrestricted slaughter, but then even better is, if you want to take the principle of mercy to the logical extreme, then you should not consume any meat, right? So the principle is same. It could be different levels, but when people don't understand the spirit, then they say as long as it is halal, it says there is a label on it, I'm going to consume, and they indulge in it, right? So and then in Christian traditions also there is the other examples that could be given. But so one has to really understand what is the principle. One should not be attached or averse, both, right, to the rules and regulations, although they may be very carefully maintained. Here Prabhupada is still talking about the royal roads. No one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. So we talked about that. So the sense enjoyment spirit, which has been current for a very long time because of our association with material nature. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is always a chance of falling down, even while acting within the boundaries of those rules and regulations. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided. So we should not indulge in sense gratification through, indulging in eating prasadam like we would, just to satisfy our tongue. It has to be, prasadam has to be honored. That's why, what is it? Prasada seva. Why do they say prasada seva? And sometimes people think prasada seva means the server is coming and serving us. This prasada seva is serving me, and he's filling my plate with such nice prasadam. So, that's how, because whatever the consciousness is, that's how we will interpret it. But prasada seva means we are serving the prasad, not that people are coming and serving prasad to me. So they say prasada seva. So is it, am I here to serve Krishna, or Krishna and his devotees are there to serve me, right? It's the same word can be misinterpreted. Darshan, right? We say the deities are dressed very nicely, opulently on the altar. You go to the altar, excuse me, and then you see the deities. I saw the deities. They were so nicely, opulently dressed. It was so pleasing to my eyes, right? So then, looking at the deities can also turn into sense gratification. Then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained the real purpose or the real meaning of darshan. Real meaning of the darshan is, when we are sincerely engaged in the service of the Lord, when we go to the temple, the Lord is pleased to see us. Lord's senses are gratified, saying, oh, here's a nice devotee, he has come to see me. Lord is pleased. So when Lord sees us and bestows his mercy on us, that is darshan. You see, it's gratification of Lord's senses, not our senses. Of course, when we see the deities are beautiful, we appreciate it, and then we say, Krishna is nicely dressed, and how pleasing it is to him. That's how we should think. How nicely is it? Instead of thinking, and of course, it's not that we should be, it's an experience. We do feel nice by looking at him, but that's secondary to Krishna's enjoyment. We focus more on the fact how Krishna is enjoying himself, having been opulently dressed. Otherwise, it becomes another object by which we are trying to again gratify our senses. So now, the rule says, well, every day we should go and have darshan of the Lord, right? So we might be acting within the constraints of the rules, but then within those constraints of the rules, we might still be engaging in sense enjoyment. So, see, that's why Srila Prabhupada called his movement Krishna consciousness. So what really needs to change is our consciousness. As long as we do not change our consciousness, we can take up different rules, regulations, rituals, but we won't make genuine spiritual progress. Okay. So, but attachment to Krishna consciousness, or acting always in the loving service of Krishna, detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. So we are not stopping the activities. See, we are detaching ourselves in the sense that, see, detachment is not same as aversion. See, all these words, they have very specific meanings. Even the English translation might not always be perfect when we're translating from Sanskrit. His words are specifically chosen. So attachment is not good. Aversion is also not good, because aversion is you're kind of just rejecting it. But detach means one is still engaged in the activity, but is not lusting over. One is not trying to gratify one's senses. So that's why detachment is good, but attachment and aversion is not. Therefore, one should try to be no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. So our consciousness should be, rather Krishna consciousness should be cultivated, because that's what's going to liberate us. The whole purpose of detachment from all kind of sense attachment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness, right? So the rules and regulations are bound to liberate us, not bind us. So that's what it boils down to. Okay, I think that's the end conclusion of this particular verse. Anyone has any questions or comments?
I have actually one query.
Yes.
So when we say that we should attach to the Krishna consciousness, and that will eventually detach us from all kind of this sensory, activities or attachments to the other things. So, okay, one thing I'm clear that how you utilize your money, or that is also one kind of attraction. The second thing is on your food, that you always consider your food first to be served. You basically offer to God, and then after you are consuming it, so it becomes secondary. Now, the third thing is that, likewise, when we say that, the sensual, or like all activities what you do for maintaining, like your genetical things and all sexual activities, then how you go and control them in consciousness. And if you don't have a attachment, then you don't get it. Even for, if you have a love towards your son, in a different way, so you are always attached to him, and you are doing all the duties, and sometimes you just go and give him a hug, and that's a different kind of love. But then when you're with your wife, then there will be definitely some lust or something coming up. Now you cannot take it away. It will be always there, right? And you are allowed to do so. So how you how you do all these activities in consciousness? Because if I read in Gujarati, like I'm reading actually in Gujarati also parallelly, so it always, everywhere it is defined that you should be going away from the visa and all other things. But eventually it doesn't happen, because we are a human being. So how being in the limits, or how we can live the life with Krishna consciousness, and
Yeah,
with all these things.
that's a good question. So as this verse was explaining, right, we should not, sorry, I was distracted by, just a second. I saw a note from Nitin Prabhu. So Ramendra Prabhu giving a class. We commonly say go see a doctor, but does not mean that we have to go see a doctor. How he's means to go see a doctor means he can see us. Okay, so you're explaining the meaning of darshan. Okay, we'll get to that. So yeah, to answer your question, the explanation that so far we have been reading, Srila Prabhupada is saying that we don't have to stop the activities of our senses, right? What has to be changed is the consciousness, right? So here it is like in this example also we saw, right? And then in the previous verses also so one is neither attached nor is one averse. So many talk about sexual relationships, right, with one's wife. So that is called dharma. Later in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that I am actually sex life, which is not against the principle of dharma. So in the 10th chapter Vibhuti Yoga, Krishna is describing how his opulence, his opulence is manifested in different uh, aspects of the nature. He says, among the immovable things, I am Himalayas. Among the fishes, I am shark. So all the fishes, the most powerful is shark, right? So in this way, he is describing his opulence. And then in the same chapter, I think he says that, I am the sex life, which is not opposed to religious principles. So it's natural, just like as you say, just like there is a child is there, you naturally, there is a baby, and Krishna has made this arrangement. The small child is very soft, cute, helpless, and so we are naturally attracted to the child, and so because of that attraction, we serve the child, right? And the old age, the Lord purposefully makes the body, crippled and deformed, so that people, they're not attracted and no one wants to take care of that body. So by that we actually develop aversion and detachment with our family members. So all my life I served my family, now they are not taking care of me, so maybe I should not be so much attached to them, I should take up spirituality. So that's the trigger. So that's the reason why it's made like that. Similarly, the child are made very cute and attractive, and so that the child is still in the beginning of the life, not the end of the life, right? Just the child has no control over stool and urine, cannot chew, doesn't have teeth. Similarly, old person who is very old, he also does not have any teeth, cannot eat, has no control over passing of stool and urine. So both of them are in the same situation, but the young baby still has an entire life. Somebody needs to raise the child up, and so by nature's arrangement, Krishna's arrangement, the child is made such cute and attractive. Everyone, no one will mind. They want to come and serve the child and the baby. So similarly, the attraction between man and woman is made so that ultimately the purpose is, one expresses one love, and the idea is that one will beget children. And so in the Vedic culture, you see that most people, they would have a huge family, right? And life was much more simpler. And, every month, which is called Ritu, an appropriate time, a husband approaches the wife and, begets a child in the womb, right? So the attachment, and attraction is there, and one is allowed to engage when the Ritu is there, right? The season is there. Once in a month, one can engage in a sexual activity, and the outcome is that one begets a child, right? And so there is no artificial contraception, right? And then that's why you see, people, they have a huge family, which is also good, right? There are other social benefits to it. And so one is not simply attracted by sense enjoyment, right? Because one is, generally in traditional culture, what they would do, right? So, once the wife goes in the menstrual cycle, right? So the first 4 days are not suitable for sexual engagement. And from the 5th through the 16th, one is allowed to engage in sexual engagement. And then one actually chooses the right time, which is called Garbhadan Samskaras. So what is an appropriate time to engage? So, based on when the time, auspicious time that a child is conceived, will be of godly qualities, and one can raise that child in a nicely way. So, one would select an appropriate time, consulting family astrologer. So that's called Muhurta for Garbhadan Samskar. And, the science goes in much detail. One can select, if you want to beget a male child or a female child. The Shastras, they describe that if a child is conceived on an odd day, so the first day when the menstrual cycle begins, right, you count that as a day 1. And then 2 through 16, right, 1 through 16. So your odd days and even days. So if a conception happens on an odd day, a female child is born. If a conception happens on an even day, a male child is born. And then it says, so depending on one who desires a male child or female child, one will select an appropriate day, then an appropriate time. There are rules and regulations of what kind of diet one has to consume. So if one wants to, the whole idea is, see, X and Y chromosomes, you cannot control chromosomes, right? But the Shastras, they say that when the two fluids mix, right, the male and the female secretions mix, if the male fluid is more, then the male child is born. If the female fluid is more, then the female child is born. So first of all, the odd even day are selected appropriately, and during that day, if somebody is they plan to beget a female child, for instance, then the husband actually fasts or consumes light meal, while the wife is recommended to consume very rich fatty food substances. So when the copulation happens, the female secretion is more, right? And when consumes and when done on like an odd day, it's almost like a pulsating, like as if the egg is almost as if like pulsating between odd and even. So when all these combinations are there, right? So the female child is born. So the entire science is described. You read Charaka Samhita. So now there's all these rules and regulations. So one is engaging, right, in the sexual propensity, because the propensity is there, the natural affection is there, but there are rules and regulation. It's not an animal instinct, right? Animals, they don't have any rules and regulations. That makes distinction between the humans and animals. And then one engages, there is enjoyment is naturally there, but then there is responsibility also, so one is not trying to get away from the responsibility to beget a child, right? And then raise the child, right? So the varnashram system, and by the arrangement of the Lord, everything was so simple. Now the thing is, with artificial way of living, where the standard of living is too high, people, even no one can afford to maintain so much children. Earlier you go, the child learns Brahmana, is trained as a Brahmana, as a Kshatriya. You don't have to send to school, you don't have to send a college. You just don't have to spend $100,000 just to get a bachelor's degree, right? And their extracurricular activities and that. So just financially it becomes so unviable. And now the whole conflict occurs, right? So what do we do, right? So the propensity to engage is there, but then the financial ability to raise the child is not there. So the current civilization, we have unnecessarily made the life complex. And the reason again is because we don't know what is the higher purpose of life in a society in general. Of course, we are part of the society, so we are living in the same society. We did not design it in this way, but there's a long history how of all these changes came about. And when the real purpose or the real reason is lost, then all uh, any changes we make to the arrangements which are already going on since millions of years, we create that artificial living creates a lot of issues. Otherwise, people all over the world, in all cultures, all religion traditions, people, they used to live more or less same, right? People live simply in a village environment, and then there is everyone has big family, a lot of children. So the arrangement is there, right? And the as aligned we are to the original way of living, it's easier for us to practice. The further we are away from the order that was established by tradition and by scriptural injunction, the more difficult it is to follow the rules and regulations. So that was a long answer, and probably you're saying there is no specific conclusion to it, but the arrangement of and the instructions are there, right? The arrangement by Krishna and the instructions to be able to practice, they are there. And only last couple of 100 years, it's an anomaly. If you compared to millions of years in the past, it's such a deviation of a large section of humanity living an artificial life was not there. And probably it won't last forever either. So you can compare to eternity, that's a blip of time where you have this anomaly, but otherwise it's very easy to follow all these principles. Otherwise, any questions or comments?
I just wanted to inform that, recently when my father passed away, and after that we had this Garuda Purana at our home. And in Garud Purana also, the same thing they have described in a brief, that which days, like the odd and even days, that's right. And then also, like they mentioned that on 14th day, if you are able to manage, then you might have a kid who might have a godly
16th
teachers. So yeah, 14th or so, yeah. So I didn't remember, but it was 14th if I'm not mistaken. So
okay. I think the scriptures that I have read, maybe I don't know, we can reconcile, but it says 16. So he says if you want, so the description says on, even describes what the nature of the child would be, depending on whether it is second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, right? Sorry, don't do the first three, but like fourth, fifth, sixth, right? And then it says, so these are different material opulences. The child will be, this boy would be like this, the girl would be like this. But then he says the godly qualities, the highest level, if you want the best possible qualities for the male child, it was 16th, and best possible qualities for a female child, it's the 15th. And that's what I recall, but I'll double check if it was 14th or not. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But yeah, the essence is the same, right? So you read that in Garuda Puran.
Yep. Thanks.
You wanted to say something? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. It is, it's pretty clear, but in between we read some articles and some of the so-called gurus, when they come and they give lectures, and some of the books, they define that somebody should always brahmacharya, so you should follow always the path of brahmacharya and all other things, which, I mean, uh, till now I also feel it is vague, because why you want to why you want to control everything, and just someday you become like a vulture, because we have seen a lot of examples in our society also, that it is
Right.
happening like that. So maybe some people in few hundred years, they have destroyed all our main essence of the shastra, or the Bhagavad Gita or the other ones which is provided, and they made their own, and which is not matching. And I have seen like some people, they really don't go into detail, and they just try and follow from the upper levels, and they get stuck somewhere.
Yeah, so that's the problem, right? And so one has to really understand the essence and the spirit of it. Like, so aversion is also not good. So when people take aversion to the superlative extent, because they probably indulged so much that now they are averse. They completely reject any kind of engagement. So the brahmacharya, the way it is defined, is that the three ashrams of life, right? So the student life, which is completely celibate life, vanprastha and sannyas is also fully celibate. And in grihastha, husband engaging in a sexual union with one's wife and begetting children is equivalent to brahmacharya. That is considered brahmacharya. One is not violating the principle of, it's not against dharma. Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, I am sex life, which is not against the principles of dharma. Right. So where is the question? So when people don't understand, it's a problem. Also, traditionally, when one reaches puberty, one would he is married, right? The body is ready, right? I mean, it's not that one. So what happens is one is already married at that age, because the attraction between boy and girl is natural. And so when one starts developing that attraction, one is already married, then one knows, oh, this is my wife. And once then person doesn't wander around, right? One because he already has a wife, right? And one is trained to into love and cultivate and live peacefully with one's wife. Similarly, the wife also, she knows, oh, I have a husband, right? So there is no need for the girls to wander around either. So this artificial restriction on when one can get married, one cannot get married, and what happens is then the girls and boys, they mix when they achieve puberty, right? Because the attraction is there, but then there is no engagement for them on religious principles, right? The laws don't allow them to get married. So that is another thing, right? So of course there are isolated incidents, they will come up with reasons, right? Well, these are reasons where why it's not good and why it's not, but if you look at the history for millions of years, people have been living like that. And the thing is that when the children are young, though they are married, it's not that the girl, they call it child marriage, right? But generally, if you look at scriptures, it's many times they are married mostly around puberty, and it's not that the wife immediately goes to the husband's place, right? But when there are festivals, when there are occasions, the boys and girls, they are allowed to the husband and the wife who are wedded, they are allowed to mix, and so they start developing attachment towards each other. And so in the mind, they know I have a husband or I have a wife, and so they don't wander around. And then when they grow a little older, then they actually stay together. So it's not that immediately they're married and they started living together, but that principle is there. So there's a lot of science behind it. It was not all whimsical, right? If you really try to understand the reason why it was done for that particular reason, then one will appreciate the the purpose of those activities. It's good. Any other questions, comments? Okay. No further questions or comments. We can move on to the next verse. (35). This is a very important verse. Okay, we have 20 minutes. I think we can discuss this. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanusthitat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayabah. Translation: it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. It's a very, very important verse. Krishna says this verse twice in Bhagavad Gita. I believe this second time he says, I believe in the 18th chapter. Is the first line is exactly the same. I think the last line is slightly different, but the essence is still the same. Instead, he's saying that here he says engaging in one's duty is to engage in another's duty is to follow another's path, or to follow another's path is dangerous. In the other version, it says that one is implicated in sinful reaction. It's the same thing. It's not. Otherwise, the rest of the verse is exactly the same. And it is also the least understood verse. We briefly discussed this last time. Is nature one's swabhav? Is it by birth or is it by samskaras? Is it innate or is it inculcated? And if you Google up, you will find a lot of debate on, they call it nature versus nurture. So is gender, ethnicity, and social classes. And if you look at the history, especially the recent modern history, last couple of 100 years, the whole idea of liberalism was sprung that, if you look at historically, there has been abuse based on gender, based on social classes, and then ethnicity, which correlates with race. The race is more about physical features, while ethnicity is more about the culture that is associated with that physical features of that race, right? So the question is there a correlation between culture, the physical features, and the culture? Similarly, the classes, right? When they say, what is it they call? Yeah, sex and gender also, right? So gender is basically the customs and the culture that is associated with the sex, right? Whether it's male or female. That's why they use different terms. There's a different connotation of the word sex versus the gender, because gender is more cultural, while the sex is more biological. Similarly, race is more biological. It's that, well, physical attributes, let's just say that. Because biologically, human race is still the same biology. Biology doesn't change, but the physical features are different. And then the ethnicity describes the custom, traditions, religions, and practices associated with the race. And a lot of time the point is missed that generally people are attracted to the people who have similar culture. And then the wedded ties also happen within the, you generally tend to marry who has similar culture. And because of that, the progeny would have similar features as their parents, and the progeny would also imbibe the culture from the parents. And so what happens over a period of time is that the physical features become unique, right? And in that lineage, and they might appear very different from the physical features of another race. But then there is a cultural aspect also. The first of, is it what is first? Is it chicken or the egg, right? It's because of the culture, and people want to limit to that same culture, and the progeny which is begotten will also tend to develop distinct features which are different from other races. So is it race simply about physical features, or there is a cultural element, right? So that's a big debate. So anyway, if you look at the history, or even how the society has changed because of historical incidences of abuse or exploitation. And I talked about this last time, that the people who actually did not understand the spirit of the law, but insisted the law has to be followed, the rules and regulations, they eventually ended up exploiting the other classes. And the liberals, they noticed that, well, this is not good, there is an exploitation, and so they tried to make a classless society. But then they did not go and question why was it like this even before the exploitation began, if you look at the history, right? Or was it always like that? Why is it that the same kind of culture and the tradition was there all over the world even when people were not traveling so much, right? So what is the reason? Why is that the tradition or the practice in a particular way, right? So what is that particular way? And this, sometimes this verse is criticized, the reason why the caste system exists. Here Krishna is saying, better to do one's own prescribed duties even if one is doing faultily, rather than doing somebody else's duty perfectly, and if that duty is against one's nature. Generally, if you want to hire someone, or when a company hires, why is it whole idea that we don't make any distinction between race, gender, right? So that's the whole idea. Because what is the priority? Priority is the job needs to happen. The corporation or a company is there for an economic purpose. Whoever gets the job done correctly, right, in the best possible way, most efficiently, should be given the opportunity. Logical, right? Makes perfect sense. But then why over here it says like this? Is it some people who has written this just to perpetuate abuse, perpetuate their ability to control and enforce power? Is that the reason? This is Krishna himself speaking. Krishna says, I created this Chaturvarna Maya system, Guna Karma Vibhagasa. Later in 4th chapter, we'll see that. So what is the reason? Well, the priority is different. Just like if you might be dealing with so many projects. Sometimes the project priority is revenue. So in order to achieve revenue, everything else is less priority, and you want to achieve revenue. Sometimes customer experience is a priority, and so you might sacrifice even revenue for some time, right? That's how big corporation want to expand into a new market. They're willing to take a hit on revenue initially, but they want to establish their market share, right? Sometimes cost reduction is a priority. So based on what is your priority, you would give more importance to one versus another. Even in the same company, it's not always the same priority, even for the same group, depending you do it. So the Vedic culture has a different worldview, and so the practices are based on one's worldview of a culture, and the purpose of the life that is understood by the culture. When the purpose of the life, when the worldview is that, well, life is linear, you live and die only once. That is a worldview, and the purpose is that because we live and die only once, we want to maximize sense gratification, right? And for sense gratification, we need so many consumer products, and we need industries and factories. We want to maximize our earnings and wealth, right? When that is the objective and the worldview, then it makes sense how the society is structured right now. But what is a Vedic worldview? Well, Vedic worldview is that you don't live and die once. As long as one is not free from karma, one will have to take multiple births, many births. And even if one achieves the highest perfection materially in this life, one will lose at the time of death. And based on one's karma, one will get another body which might be favorable or unfavorable. It could be any species of life. So even if you perfectly execute your duties and if you get perfect results, the results would be temporary. It won't last forever. And you'll be again put into a situation where no one can maintain the highest position at all the times. That's the modes of the nature are acting. Sattva, Rajatama. Everyone goes through the cycle of up and down to the higher planetary system, lower planetary system, different species of life. No one can maintain a stable position. It's impossible. So he says, what is then the purpose? Purpose is not to achieve perfection, because even if you achieve perfection, it's not going to last. And what is the purpose? The purpose is you to get out of the cycle of birth and death. Right? In order to get out from the cycle of birth and death, you have to pick up an activity by which you do not accrue karma. And the law of karma is, well, if you're acting according to your nature, you don't accrue karma. Just like a tiger who consumes any carnivore animal, when that animal consumes flesh, one does not accrue karma, because you cannot expect a carnivore to eat grass or herbs or vegetation, right? Similarly, the humans, they can also have, they have a particular nature. And when they're acting according to that nature, there is no karmic reaction. So while acting according to one's nature, even if one does not like it, even if one might not be so good at it, at least initially, right? It is better that one engages in that duty as opposed to doing somebody else's duty perfectly, which is against one's nature, and one accrues karma. So that is the principle, right? But if somebody does not understand this principle, why this principle is there, it is based on what worldview, then this appears that, the Vedic society was simply meant to perpetuate this caste system. So the nature is acquired by birth, in the sense that because we have a particular nature, we are born into a particular family. We are not put into a drastically different situation, because we have affinity towards a particular nature. We take a birth in a family where their nature is cultivated. So the base starts based on our nature from previous life. Does it mean that the nature cannot change? Well, nature can change. You can raise that child in a different samskaras and different upbringings, and then slowly that nature can be changed. But the Vedic culture says that what will you achieve by changing the nature? Right? Suppose somebody is a Vaishya, and then from Vaishya one changes the nature by training to a Kshatriya or to a Brahmana. It's still within the three modes of nature, right? Now the time and energy is lost in trying to change one's nature. Now even if that nature is changed to Brahmana or Kshatriya, that is not perfection of life. One has to engage according to that nature, offer the results of the fruit. Sorry, one has to engage according to the nature. Suppose somebody changes from Vaishya to a Kshatriya or a Brahmana. Having changed, then one has to engage in that nature without fruitive mentality, because if one continues to engage in a fruitive mentality, even then one does not achieve purification. The law of diminishing returns that I've talked so many times works actually when one is engaged according to one's nature. Eventually, when one loses the fruitive mentality, or the attraction goes away, one is still impelled to work according to one's nature. And when one works according to one's nature, not being impelled by fruitive mentality, then that is in the mode of goodness. When we want something in return, that is in the mode of passion. So in order to make progress in spiritual life, we have to come to the mode of goodness. And what is goodness? Goodness means I'm happy with my current situation, I don't want to change it. Passion means I'm not happy with my current situation and I'm going to work hard to change it. Ignorance means I'm not happy with my current situation, I'm not going to work to change it. You see? So if the purpose is to come to the platform of goodness, and goodness means I'm happy with my current situation, I don't want to change it, then why change from Vaishya to Kshatriya or a Sudra to Brahmana? So born in a family of particular nature, just receive the samskaras in that and make that nature perfect. Be situated in. If you try to acquire another nature, become varna sankara, mixed, right? And also time and energy is wasted. So, and one is actually going in the opposite direction, because now he's cultivating mode of passion. I'm not satisfied in this social class. I want to change it. That is passion. When one is satisfied in that social class and when nurtures, so that's the science. So in the debate of nurture versus nature, the question, there is a big debate. If you Google, you can search, nurture versus nature. Is it nature by birth or is it nurtured? Well, the Vedic scripture says it's both. But to make things simple and efficient and to really focus on the higher purpose of life, the nurture aligns with the nature and does not go opposite to the nature. That has been the history. Okay. And so how does this relate to karma yoga? I think I've explained it many times, but in essence is that when doing our prescribed duties, even if they're done faultily, when one is engaged according to one's nature, one will slowly cultivate knowledge and renunciation, right? Unless renunciation is cultivated, one cannot be situated in the platform of spirituality. In the sense that I gave you the example, suppose we have, the entire day is free, we don't have any responsibilities, but we cannot sit and chant the entire day or sit and just read Bhagavatam, because our mind is surcharged with material activities, propensities. But by karma yoga, one can slowly cultivate detachment when one is offering the results of one's work as a service to Krishna. And what is worthy of offering as service to Krishna? Work that is not done with a fruity mentality. Just like food or bhoga that is prepared with a propensity to enjoy is not worthy of offering to Krishna. Similarly, work performed with a fruity mentality, its results are not worthy of offering to Krishna. And then how we remove our fruity mentality? Well, the fruity mentality will remain as long as we get some gratification from the results. But the law of diminishing returns, the gratification will tend to go away. And it can be sustained in two ways. Either we need higher and higher dosage or higher and higher stimulation, which defeats the purpose of fruity mentality, or we are engaged according to the nature. And so the higher and higher stimulation actually will eventually lead to destruction. So the path that is chosen is to engage according to one's nature. So there is a lot of deep science behind it, but if one does not understand, this what makes no sense. If you tell anyone, you walk up to someone in the street, and if you tell them this, they'll think you're crazy. You see, if you're saying that one should continue to act faultily, than to do something where much one can do perfectly, they'll say it's completely crazy. So, this idea is recognized by some intellectuals. So I think I talked about this. There is this Harvard Business Review article which says, follow your blisters, not your passion. And if blisters means, you might not like something, you might not be good at it. You might, though you hate doing it, you're kind of, impelled towards acting or, towards that work. And so that is better even for one's happiness and success. And I think that's what the conclusion of the article was. So kind of a similar idea. It's not a mainstream idea, but you see, people who are intelligent who can, come up to a similar conclusion by their observations of what they see in the world. Okay, so purport. I know we have 3 minutes. I think I explained most of it, so we should be able to go over this quickly. Let's finish this and then we'll stop. So one should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical conditions, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are ordered by the spiritual master for transcendental service to Krishna, of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to the prescribed duties even up to the death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle is followed. Principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. So here Srila Prabhupada is adding another dimension to it, where he's saying that there is beyond material activities, there is activities which are fully transcendental or fully spiritual. Now, where one achieves, receives instruction directly from the spiritual master and then acts according to it. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation. And one should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. See, the different rules apply to different people. And as long as they're engaging according to their nature, they don't accrue any gross sinful reactions. Despite of the fact that there are faults in the activity, just like hunting is allowed for Kshatriyas, because by nature, they are they have this passion, and they are supposed to be good in fighting the enemies. And if they are not accustomed to seeing blood, right, then they cannot fight. Otherwise, they will have this PTSD syndrome, like many soldiers they have when they go to fight. They have been trained offline, but they have not seen real blood. They might be good at shooting and using weapons and hitting the target, but that's not same. They're not accustomed to seeing blood. So when they first time see somebody's head blow off in a battlefield, they cannot handle it. And they have this PTSD syndrome. They're messed up and they need psychological treatment, right? So that's what happens when you engage a non-Kshatriya to become a Kshatriya. Here's a perfect example, right? He's able to do the job perfectly. Soldiers, maybe he's an expert marksman, right? And hit the target. He's a great sniper. You put them in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever the wars are going on, and they are really good at hitting the target. So they are able to do the job perfectly. But because it's not their Kshatriya nature, maybe they will experience PTSD syndrome. But if you look at the traditional Kshatriya classes, right, the Sikhs, the Gurkhas, they have seen so much violence. You never hear them experiencing PTSD syndromes. So it all boils down to nature. So how is that nature cultivated? Well, okay, you simply don't use how to use learn how to use bow and arrow, but then they go and hunt animals. So there is violence, the animals are killed. So there is a fault, but every activity has some fault. But they are engaged according to their nature, so it's not a big sin for them, right? So you see, in this example, we could see that what happens. It's better to not be a great marksman, right? But continue to be a Kshatriya than to be an expert marksman when one is not a Kshatriya and then go and do the fight, right? So it's not about skills, it's not about to be able to execute, has to align with one's nature. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished, either die in the battlefield, right? So if one is not fighting perfectly, one will die. That's all right. Better to, if your nature is Kshatriya, go and fight. If you win, good. If you lose, that's also all right. It's better to be vanquished rather than following the rules of, better to be vanquished, following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of non-violence. So this applies to Arjuna. He says you cannot go and take sannyas like a Brahmana. You are a Kshatriya, you go and fight. Even if you are not able to fight perfectly and you die in the due course, that's all right. So everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends, so it's very important, right? Gradually, not abruptly. Before we do abruptly, we won't be able to sustain. We say, oh, this work is so troublesome, let me just retire, I'll just sit and chant 24 hours. Well, that's not possible. We won't be able to do it. If we have not gone through this gradual purification of our modes of nature, it won't happen. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master. Don't make noise. So that's the other point. When one is actually, by doing work according to one's nature, achieves spiritual perfection, then one is not under the influence of the modes. In that situation, one can become a fully renounced, or one can even take activities which which are instructed by spiritual master, and which could be anything and everything. One is not bound like those training wheels, and earlier they are helping us to get liberated, right? Apparently they are restricting us, but they are helping us learn and get eventually liberated. And when one is liberated, you don't need training wheels. Similarly, when one is fully liberated, one is not bound by those rules and regulation, and one can act directly under the order of the spiritual master, regardless of the nature of the work. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmana, or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya, you see. So that is at a transcendental stage. So right now what's happening in the society, we are artificially trying to create a classless society. Right? So we have not gone through the purification, but we assume that all men are fully equal in all respects. Right? And then what happens is equality is achieved at the lowest common denominator. Right? If you say that all the different gradations of crude oil, they are all same. Right? Crude oil, when it goes through fractional distillation, from crude oil will come kerosene, which is not so refined. There would be petrol, there would be natural gas, then there is aviation gas fuel, right? Aviation fuel, which is the highest level of purification. So all the different gradation happens through fractional distillation. Similarly, social society, all the varnas, they are separated through the purification of samskaras. But if you say everything is equal, well, then it has to be equal at the level of tar, crude oil, right? Otherwise the aviation fuel is not same as tar. It can be same as tar only at the level of crude oil. Otherwise, it has to be distilled. Similarly, if you say that all classes are equal, then what will happen? The society would be at the lowest common denominator. So in Kalo Sudra Sambhava, everyone acts like a Sudra and on the level of a Sudra, because we are artificially trying to create a classless society. Equality can only be always at lowest common denominator. You cannot raise the entire society to the highest level, right? That can only happen when everyone is spiritually liberated. At that level, a Kshatriya can act as a Brahmana, or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya. So that's not possible. In the transcendental state, the distinction of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishwamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on acted as a Brahmana, whereas Parshuram was a Brahmana, later acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendently situated, they could do so, but as long as one is a material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. So thus ends the explanation on this particular verse, very important verse number 35. Any questions or comments before we conclude today's class? Okay. Looks like there are no questions. So we'll conclude. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.